The January chill bit through the early morning air of New York City. The Bronx, wrapped in gray fog, bustled only faintly as the city's undercurrent of life began its daily grind. Emma Carter, bundled in her sanitation worker's uniform, moved briskly along the empty streets. Her gloves, worn from years of work, gripped the wooden handle of her broom as she cleared the sidewalks of debris left behind by the night. Emma had worked this route for years, and she knew the rhythm of the Bronx better than most. The graffiti-covered buildings, the faint hum of distant traffic, the flicker of neon signs from late-night diners, this was her city. But today, something felt different, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. As Emma approached a narrow alley between two shuttered storefronts, a faint sound pricked her ears. It wasn't the scurrying of rats or the wind rattling the fire escapes, it was a cry. A weak, almost imperceptible sound, like the wail of a kitten lost in the cold. Emma froze, her breath clouded in front of her face as she strained to listen. The cry came again, a soft, desperate plea, heart-pounding. Emma followed the sound to a large, dented dumpster tucked in the shadows. She hesitated, dread pooling in her stomach. Using her gloved hands, Emma carefully pushed the lid open. The stench of rotting food and discarded waste hit her instantly. But she hardly noticed. Her eyes widened in horror as she saw the source of the cry, a tiny, shivering infant, wrapped in a filthy blanket, lying motionless among the trash. Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling. She reached in without thinking, her hands trembling as she cradled the infant against her chest. The baby's skin was ice cold, and its tiny chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. "Stay with me," Emma murmured, clutching the baby tightly as she bolted out of the alley. Her feet pounded against the pavement as she sprinted toward her sanitation truck. "You're going to be okay. I've got you." Emma's hands shook as she dialed 911 from her phone. She barely registered the operator's calm voice on the other end. "I found a baby, an abandoned baby, in a dumpster," Emma blurted, her voice cracked as she spoke. "It's freezing. Please, send help." Minutes later, the wail of sirens cut through the cold morning air. An ambulance screeched to a halt near her truck, and paramedics rushed out. Emma handed over the baby reluctantly, her heart aching as the tiny form was whisked into the warmth of the ambulance. She climbed in after them, refusing to leave. The hospital was a blur of activity. Doctors and nurses worked quickly, checking the baby's vitals and wrapping it in warm blankets. Emma hovered in the corner of the room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She couldn't tear her eyes away. Finally, a doctor approached her. "You saved this baby's life," he said, his tone a mix of admiration and relief. "She's severely hypothermic, but she's stable for now." "She?" Emma repeated, her voice soft. The weight of the situation hit her fully. This tiny girl had been left to die, discarded like garbage. When Emma arrived home later that day, her husband, Daniel, was waiting for her, a tall, broad-shouldered man with kind eyes. Daniel had always been Emma's rock. He listened intently as she recounted the morning's events, his expression shifting from shock to sadness. "She's just a baby, Daniel," Emma said, her voice breaking. "She doesn't even have a name." Daniel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "What happens now? Does she have any family?" Emma shook her head. "The hospital called child services." But, she hesitated, the thought forming in her mind for the first time. "What if we could take her in?" Daniel's brows furrowed. "Emma, that's a big decision. Are you sure?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "We've wanted a child for so long. Maybe this is our chance. Maybe she's meant to be with us." The room fell silent as Daniel considered her words. Finally, he nodded. "If this is what you want, I'm with you." The following weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, interviews, and emotional highs and lows. Emma and Daniel worked tirelessly to prove they could provide a safe, loving home for the baby. They named her Hope, a reflection of what she had already brought into their lives. Hope's fragile health improved under the care of doctors and her new parents. She began to thrive, her cheeks filling out and her tiny hands reaching for Emma's face during feedings. For Emma and Daniel, every smile and coo from Hope felt like a miracle. But as they settled into their new lives as parents, shadows of doubt began to creep in. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that someone out there knew about Hope, someone who might come back for her. Across the city, In a rundown apartment in Harlem, Sophia Reyes sat on the edge of a worn-out mattress, clutching a news article about a baby rescued from a dumpster. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. The baby was hers, she knew it in her heart. Sophia's life had been a series of tragedies. Abused by her boyfriend, Derek, and abandoned by her family. She had been left with no support. The night she abandoned her daughter still haunted her. She had whispered a desperate prayer as she walked away from the dumpster, hoping someone would find her baby before it was too late. Now, seeing the baby alive and thriving brought a glimmer of relief, but also a deep ache. "I have to get her back," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need to make this right." Emma stands in Hope's nursery, watching her sleep peacefully. Outside, the snow falls softly, covering the city in a blanket of white. Across town, Sophia stares out of her apartment window, the newspaper clutched tightly in her hands. The lives of these two women, bound by one child, are about to collide in ways neither of them could have imagined. Sophia Reyes stood outside the offices of the Legal Aid Society, her breath fogging in the chilly February air. The brick building loomed above her, its windows offering a glimpse of people who, like her, had nowhere else to turn. She adjusted the frayed scarf around her neck and stepped inside. "Can I help you?" asked a receptionist, her voice kind but brisk. Sophia hesitated. For months, she'd told herself she didn't deserve help. Now, desperation outweighed her guilt. "I need to get my daughter back," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "She was taken. No. I abandoned her. But I didn't have a choice." The receptionist's brows knitted. "Let me get someone for you." Minutes later, Sophia sat across from Rachel Harper, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer in her early 40s. Rachel listened intently as Sophia recounted her story, the abuse, the isolation, the night she left Hope in the dumpster. "I'll be honest with you, Sophia," Rachel said, her tone measured. "This won't be easy. You left your child in life-threatening conditions. The couple who found her has likely bonded with her, and the courts will prioritize stability. I don't care how hard it is," Sophia said, her voice firm despite the tears welling in her eyes. "She's my daughter. I have to try." At the Carter home, Emma and Daniel were adjusting to life as new parents. Hope's laughter filled the apartment, and her presence had brought a renewed sense of purpose to their lives. But everything changed when they received a letter from New York Family Court. "What does it say?" Daniel asked, watching Emma's hands tremble as she opened the envelope. Emma's voice faltered as she read aloud. "Sophia Reyes has filed a petition to regain custody of Hope. A court hearing has been scheduled." The words blurred as Emma's heart raced. She's coming back for her. The first pre-trial hearing was held in a modest courtroom in downtown Manhattan. Emma and Daniel sat on one side of the room, their lawyer Christine Lane beside them. Across the aisle, Sophia sat with Rachel Harper. The tension was palpable. The judge, Honorable Theodore Graham, addressed the room. "Ms. Reyes, you claim to be the biological mother of the child known as Hope Carter. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the weight of the room. "And you acknowledge that you abandoned the child?" I did, Your Honor. But it wasn't because I didn't love her. I was in an abusive relationship, and I believed she would be safer without me." Emma felt a surge of anger. She leaned toward Christine and whispered, "She left Hope to die. That's not love." Christine placed a calming hand on Emma's arm. "Let's focus on what we can control." The judge scheduled a formal custody hearing, instructing both parties to provide evidence of their fitness as caregivers. The battle had officially begun. News of the custody battle spread quickly, drawing media attention and public debate. Tabloids dubbed it the dumpster baby case, with headlines ranging from sympathetic to accusatory. "Mother fights for redemption. A second chance at motherhood?" "Hero couple saves baby. Now faces custody fight." Public opinion was divided. Supporters of Sophia called her a victim of systemic failure, highlighting her abuse and poverty. Meanwhile, Emma and Daniel were hailed as heroes who had given Hope a chance at life. Emma tried to shield herself from the noise, but the whispers followed her everywhere. At the grocery store, a woman muttered, "How can she think she deserves that baby back?" Meanwhile, a coworker at Daniel's firm said, "Poor Sophia, she's been through hell." The couple's once peaceful life felt like it was under siege. Sophia's life had been a series of uphill battles, and this fight was no different. As part of her case, She was required to enroll in parenting classes and attend therapy. The sessions were grueling, forcing her to confront her past and her deepest fears. Her therapist, Dr. Lena Price, didn't let her off easy. You need to understand, Sophia, that this isn't just about proving you can parent. It's about showing the court, and yourself, that you're stable and capable. Sophia nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. I know, I'll do whatever it takes. Despite her resolve, the weight of public judgment and the whispers in her Brooklyn neighborhood wore her down. Every time she saw a headline about the case, she felt like the world was reminding her of her failure. Emma and Daniel prepared for their court battle with equal determination. Christine guided them through the process, emphasizing the need to focus on Hope's well-being. Remember, this isn't about attacking Sophia, Christine said during a meeting at her office. It's about showing that Hope is thriving with you and that uprooting her would cause unnecessary harm. Emma nodded, though the idea of restraining her emotions felt impossible. I just want what's best for Hope. So does the court, Christine replied, and right now, what's best for her is you. The first custody hearing was a whirlwind of emotions. Sophia took the stand, her voice steady but her hands trembling as she recounted her abuse and desperation. Her lawyer presented photographs of her bruises and police reports documenting Derek's threats. Rachel turned to the judge. Ms. Reyes was not just a victim of domestic violence, she was a victim of a system that failed to protect her. She left her daughter out of fear, believing it was her only option to keep her safe. Emma clenched her fists, biting her tongue as Christine countered. Your Honor, while we sympathize with Ms. Reyes's plight, the fact remains. She abandoned her child in a dumpster, leaving her to die. Hope's safety and stability must take precedence. The hearing ended without a resolution, leaving both parties in limbo. Outside the courtroom, Emma and Sophia crossed paths. The air between them crackled with tension. You think you're the only one who loves her? Sophia said, her voice tight with emotion. She's my daughter. Emma's eyes flashed. She was dying when I found her. You gave up on her. I didn't. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Neither woman willing to back down. As the city lights flickered in the distance, Sophia sat in her apartment, staring at a photograph of Hope from the news. Across town, Emma stood by Hope's crib, watching her sleep. Both women were consumed by the same thought. I have to fight for her. The courtroom was packed on the day of the first trial. Reporters jostled for space in the gallery, their cameras flashing as Emma and Daniel entered. Hope nestled in Emma's arms. Across the aisle, Sophia sat rigidly, her lawyer Rachel whispering last-minute reassurances. The tension in the room was palpable. Judge Theodore Graham, known for his impartiality and strict adherence to the law, called the session to order. This court will now hear the case regarding custody of the minor, Hope Carter, between the petitioning biological mother, Ms. Sophia Reyes, and the current custodians, Mr. and Mrs. Carter. Emma squeezed Daniel's hand as their lawyer Christine Lane rose to deliver her opening statement. Your Honor, Hope Carter has flourished under my client's care. Removing her from their home would disrupt the stability she needs to thrive. We will demonstrate that this arrangement is in the child's best interest. Rachel stood next, her voice steady but filled with conviction. Your Honor, Ms. Reyes acknowledges her past mistakes, but those mistakes were born out of desperation and fear. We will show that she has worked tirelessly to improve her life and deserves the chance to reunite with her daughter. The battle lines were drawn. Sophia took the stand first. She sat stiffly, hands clasped tightly in her lap as Rachel guided her through her testimony. Ms. Reyes, Rachel began, can you describe your life leading up to the night you abandoned your child? Sophia's voice wavered as she recounted her story. I was in a relationship with Derek, a man who controlled every aspect of my life. He isolated me, beat me, and told me I was worthless. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought, maybe a baby would change things. But it only got worse. A collective hush fell over the courtroom as Sophia described the night she fled. Clutching her newborn daughter in the freezing cold, I thought leaving her somewhere public might give her a chance. I prayed someone would find her. I didn't want her to die. Christine rose for the cross-examination, her tone firm but not cruel. Ms. Reyes, do you understand the severity of your actions? Yes, Sophia admitted, her voice thick with emotion. But I believed I was doing what was best for her. Is that why you didn't call the police or social services? Christine pressed. Instead, you left her in a dumpster, where she could have died from exposure. Sophia's head bowed, tears streaming down her face. I was scared. I didn't think anyone would help me. When it was Emma's turn to testify, she approached the stand with calm determination. She described the moment she found Hope, her voice cracking as she recalled the baby's lifeless body and how she had prayed the child would survive. From that moment, Emma said, Hope became my world. My husband and I have given her everything: love, security, and a future. She is safe with us. Rachel's cross-examination was sharp. Mrs. Carter, do you believe Ms. Reyes doesn't love her child? Emma hesitated. I believe she loves her in her own way. But love alone doesn't make a parent. Rachel pressed further. Do you think Hope deserves to know her biological mother? Emma's eyes flashed. Hope deserves to be with people who won't abandon her. The trial took a shocking turn when Rachel introduced new evidence, a recorded voicemail from Derek, Sophia's abusive ex. In the message, his voice dripped with venom. If you don't get rid of that baby, I'll make sure neither of you survives. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Rachel turned to the judge. Your Honor, this evidence corroborates my client's claims of abuse and fear for her life. Christine countered immediately. While tragic, this does not excuse Ms. Reyes's decision to abandon her child in such a dangerous manner. The judge called for a recess to review the evidence. When the trial resumed, Christine introduced her own surprise, Mrs. Eleanor Greaves, a social worker who had previously worked with Sophia. Ms. Reyes was referred to my office multiple times. Eleanor testified. I tried to offer resources, but she declined assistance on several occasions. Rachel shot to her feet. Your Honor, this testimony only reflects the systemic failure Sophia faced. She didn't reject help, she was overwhelmed by fear and coercion. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The final day of the trial was a whirlwind of emotions. Both sides presented their closing arguments, each appealing to the judge's sense of justice and humanity. Rachel stood tall, her voice resolute. Sophia Reyes is not perfect, but she is human. She has faced unimaginable circumstances and emerged determined to be a better mother. Denying her the chance to be part of her daughter's life would be cruel. Christine followed, her tone equally impassioned. Hope Carter is thriving in her current environment. Removing her from the only family she knows would cause irreparable harm. My clients have proven their unwavering commitment to her well-being. Judge Graham listened intently, his expression unreadable. He adjourned the court, promising a decision within 48 hours. That night, Emma and Daniel sat together in silence, Hope sleeping peacefully in her crib. Across the city, Sophia paced her tiny apartment, clutching a photo of her daughter. Both women prayed for the same thing, a future where Hope would be loved and safe. The tension was unbearable as they awaited the judge's decision, knowing that their lives, and Hope's, would be forever changed by what came next. The courtroom was silent as Judge Theodore Graham returned to his bench. His expression was unreadable, and the tension in the air was suffocating. Emma, Daniel, and Sophia sat frozen, their eyes locked on the judge as he shuffled papers before speaking. After careful consideration of all evidence and testimonies, Judge Graham began, his voice calm but firm. I have reached a decision in the matter of Hope Carter's custody. Emma gripped Daniel's hand tightly, her heart pounding. Sophia's face was pale, her fingers clasped together as if in silent prayer. Hope Carter has clearly thrived under the care of the Carters. The judge continued. However, it is evident that Ms. Reyes has made significant efforts to address her past and prove her commitment to being part of her daughter's life. In light of this, the court awards primary custody to Mr. and Mrs. Carter, with Ms. Reyes granted supervised visitation rights. The courtroom erupted into whispers and murmurs. The decision hung heavily in the air, carrying a mix of relief, disappointment, and hope. Sophia fought back tears, her voice cracking as she whispered, "Thank you, Your Honor." Emma exhaled a shaky breath, knowing the fight wasn't entirely over but relieved Hope would stay with them. In the weeks following the verdict, Sophia began her supervised visits with Hope. The first meeting took place in a brightly lit room at a family services center. Hope, now a lively toddler, clung to Emma's leg as Sophia entered the room. "Hi, sweetie," Sophia said softly, kneeling to Hope's level. The little girl stared at her with wide, curious eyes but didn't move. Emma knelt beside Hope and gently encouraged her. "It's okay, sweetheart. This is Sophia." "Mommy?" Hope asked, her small voice hesitant. Sophia's heart broke at the word. "Yes, baby, I'm your mommy," she said, tears filling her eyes. The visits were initially awkward and strained. Hope, too young to understand the complexities, clung to Emma, wary of Sophia. But over time, small moments of connection began to blossom. Sophia brought toys and read stories. And slowly, Hope's wariness gave way to trust. Sophia's path to redemption wasn't without its challenges. Derek, her abusive ex, resurfaced, demanding money and threatening to ruin her newfound stability. One evening, as Sophia was leaving work at the cafe, she found him waiting outside. "You think you can just forget about me?" Derek sneered, his towering frame blocking her path. "You owe me." Sophia's hands shook, but she refused to cower. "I don't owe you anything. Derek, leave me alone." He grabbed her arm, but before he could say more, a voice rang out, "Get your hands off her." It was Daniel, who had come to check on Sophia after sensing something was off in their last conversation. Behind him stood a police officer. Derek was arrested on the spot, his threats finally catching up to him. The incident with Derek brought Sophia and the Carters closer. Daniel and Emma saw the courage it had taken for Sophia to stand up to him, and their respect for her grew. For her part, Sophia began to see Emma and Daniel not as adversaries but as allies who shared her love for Hope. One evening, as they sat together after a visitation, Emma spoke candidly. "Sophia, I didn't think we'd get to this point, but I see now how much you've changed. Hope's lucky to have you in her life." Sophia nodded, her eyes filling with gratitude. "And I see how much you love her. I'm grateful every day that you found her when you did." Months turned into years, and Hope grew up surrounded by the love of her extended family. She spent weekdays with Emma and Daniel and weekends with Sophia, who had moved into a more stable home and continued to work at the cafe. Eventually becoming a manager, Sophia's relationship with Hope deepened, and Emma found herself genuinely enjoying Sophia's company during family outings. They began sharing stories and advice, building a fragile but real friendship. Hope, now a precocious 7-year-old, brought her two mothers together in ways neither could have imagined. "You know," Hope said one afternoon as they sat in the park, "I'm lucky. Most kids only have one mommy. But I have two." Emma and Sophia exchanged a smile, their shared love for Hope bridging the gap that had once divided them. Years later, Hope stood on the stage at her high school graduation, her long auburn hair catching the sunlight as she adjusted the microphone. The crowd hushed as she began to speak. "When I was a baby, I was given a second chance. Two incredible women made sure I grew up surrounded by love, even when it wasn't easy. My mom, Emma, taught me about kindness and perseverance. My mom, Sophia, showed me courage and strength. Everything I am today is because of them." Tears streamed down the faces of both Emma and Sophia as the crowd erupted into applause. Daniel squeezed Emma's hand, his pride evident. The story ended where it began, in the Bronx, now a place of shared memories rather than division. Emma, Daniel, and Sophia sat together on a bench at the park, watching Hope play with her younger siblings. "You know," Sophia said, breaking the silence, "for the longest time, I thought I'd lost everything. But now, I think I have more than I ever dreamed of." Emma smiled. "We all do." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the unlikely family shared laughter and stories, their journey one of redemption, resilience, and love. The story of Hope Carter and her two mothers became a source of inspiration for the community. It reminded everyone that family isn't defined by blood alone but by the love and sacrifices made for one another. Hope, now a confident young woman, carried with her the lessons of two extraordinary women who proved that even the most fractured lives can be mended with compassion and determination.